Jer si milostivi čovekoljubiv Bog i tebi slavu uznosimo, Otcu i Sinu i Svetome Duhu, sada i uvek i u vekove vekova.
In a world of shadows and secrets untold, where primeval stories make the brave go cold, mighty gods are high and realms below, whispers of legends that shape each soul. And nightmarish dreams, cryptids lurking, nothing's as it seems, giants walking, angels and demons fight, only truth can bring the light. Through the echoes of time, the tales unfold, mysteries arise as the prophecies are foretold, from valiant knights to buried treasure, this podcast brings nothing but pleasure. Welcome to Mysteries and Majesty. Study with us, and don't be a travesty. Theology, mythology, fantasy, and horror. Dungeons and dragons, Skyrim and Mordor. And Mordor powers haunt the evening, in gothic castles where they're screaming. Wizards cast spells in their towers tonight, exploiting enigmas hidden from our sight. Archaeologists make excavations deep of the ancient tombs where pharaohs sleep. In the dust of ages we chronicles keep, storytelling's power of monsters that creep. Mysteries and majesty, the place for you to learn about this haunted space. From scholarship to manuscripts of old, unlock the secrets of wisdom and gold.
Blessed Sunday, everyone. Welcome to episode 123. I'm especially encouraged and delighted to see my brother Dain coming back for a little over a year on the podcast. We did this two phenomenal episodes back in 2023 on some mystery/horror true eyewitness stories, and we had a bunch of fun. So Dain, welcome back on the podcast. When it comes to your spiritual and theological background, what can you say to reintroduce yourselves, to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hey, thanks. Excuse me, getting over a cold here. Sorry about that. Hey, thanks, Nico. Yeah, I've been in school. I've been a Christian for almost 30 years now, and lately I went through a master's degree program. I'm not quite through it yet, still working on it. But yeah, that's kind of some education I've had, and into podcasting like you, and kind of hoping to get into some research and writing and podcasting in the future after I finish my degree. And so it's great to be back. I missed you, man.
Hey, I miss you too. And honestly, one day when you have time, I'll encourage you to write a couple of books that we can dissect together and, make more
Awesome.
fun episodes about that, including, a combo that would include biblical theology, archaeology, mystery, mythology. That would be, these are kinds of stuff I really like the most.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
Shaun, my dear co-host, welcome back. Can you please share something again when it comes to yourself and your background to the audience, and also something when it comes to your mom and the prayer request we'll have to our audience?
Yeah, I'm privileged to be the co-host for Myths, Mysteries, and Majesty, and that's been awesome. I've got to meet so many cool people, and yeah, I've just been working on the segment that we talked about, Nico, and I actually had to go through and rewrite some stuff because people don't always tell the truth about their experiences. So when you go digging, sometimes you have to go back and revisit it, because I want to put something out there that's gonna, not only be creepy, but also be something that's true, because we don't want to deal with things that aren't, above board, or something that someone could just look into it and pull it apart. So I've been hard at work on that. And yeah, my mom's been going through some health issues, and it's been pretty scary. And so I would really love for you to pray for her, that she would get better, and that we could have her around for a little longer, because we need her.
Man, I just want to encourage your mom, Lisa, who is currently in the podcast live chat. Miss Lisa, we've been praying for you. I pray for you also, and we prayed before we went live. So we were just praying that God will do this divine touch in your life and heal you, bring you comfort and supernatural divine peace that I know I also needed when I was going through something last year. And we'll keep you in prayers. And of course, we expect Shaun to give us heads up every day. That being said, we'll be dealing with this topic of the lion-like champions of Moab. There are 2 or 3 different theories what these people could be. Could it be that just elite men, guards, or champions, just humans who are like so brave to be described as lions, like brave as a lion, courageous as a lion, strong as a lion? Or could it be that if we would do some, cross-referencing and including extra biblical studies, could it be that these were a special group of warriors that will be considered to be hybrids or even giants? When it comes to that, let me first read briefly two main passages that we'll be drawing our information from. The first one comes from 2 Samuel 23:20, and I'll read from NIV. NIV is not my favorite translation. I don't have a favorite translation, but it's one of these most commonly used, and it's a very smooth, transition between the text. So I was just thinking I'll use that one. So again, 2 Samuel 23:20 says this: Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, performed great exploits. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. And this is 1 Chronicles 11:22, which basically says the same thing. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, performed great exploits. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest fighters. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. Now, why is this passage so interesting? I have to admit, in my readings of the Old Testament, I didn't notice this passage until last year, that people start making a big deal out of it. They're like, "Oh, lion man, lion." It's like, oh my gosh, could there be something that I missed in my biblical reading, in my studies? And this is why it's interesting, because we just read NIV, right? NIV would says that these were the 2 mightiest warriors. I'm going to 2 Samuel 23:20. However, there are different translations. NLT would says 2 champions of Moab. ESV would says 2 Ariels, because they don't know how to translate Ariel. So they will say 2 Ariels of Moab. The Berean Bible Bible translation says 2 champions of Moab. KJV literal translation and Young's translation, so 3 translations, say 2 lion-like men of Moab. New King James differs from King James, which will say 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. And then we have NSB, CSB, NET, which will say 2 sons of Ariel of Moab. When it comes to 1 Chronicles 11:22, like we said, NIV says 2 mightiest warriors from Moab. NLT says 2 champions of Moab, which is very similar. ESV says 2 heroes of Moab. Berean Bible says 2 champions of Moab. KJV and literal and Young, again, those 3 translations will say 2 lion-like men of Moab. Then we have New King James, which says 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. And NSB, CSB, NET saying 2 sons of Ariel of Moab. So basically, as we read, their description would be that these warriors were described as having faces like lions. They're also said to be as fast as gazelles in the mountains. Their role would be that they're considered to be elite corps in the Moabite army, and they're considered to be some of the mightiest men of their time. And I know there are different versions of interpretations of how we understand this. Is it just a metaphor, or is it something more mysterious? And can we relate this maybe with Genesis 6 and passages like that? So that will be our topic for tonight. Dain, when it comes to your studies, in your biblical references section, what is it that you would like to add when it comes to the etymology of this crucial word for tonight that has to do with Ariel?
Yeah, so Ariel is a Hebrew word. Ari means lion, and El is a standard word for God. So together we have Ariel. Ha Ariel Moab. So Ha is the definite article. So when we put that together, we have the lion of God of Moab, or something along those lines. Of course, you just read off all of those different ways of looking at it. I think that there's lots of different ways of terming that. One I've come across is distinguished warrior. Another is, as I mentioned, lion of God. It could be a technical term applied to military leaders in the ancient Near East. And if you look at, and we might hit on this later, but lion and lioness symbolism is attached to military and warlike gods and goddesses in different reliefs, in steles, in in literature, in statues, and things like that. So there's a very strong military connection with lion. And just to read a little blurb, I think, did you want me to get into the archaeology stuff yet, or wait on that? We can
not yet.
that.
Just yeah. Thank you. Just the etymology. Yeah,
that's basically what I wanted to say there, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. That helps.
Mm-hmm.
And Shaun, when it comes to the room meeting and how sometimes we can make this word root word fallacy, I know that your research also wanted to say something important on this topic.
Yeah, when we're thinking about what words mean, like Ariel, one thing that we have to be cautious of is not committing a root word fallacy. So, like Ariel, as Dain said, it comes from two words put together, which lion of God, and sometimes that works out, and that may be the case in this instance. But there's also cases where you put two words together, and if you were to just take their two literal meanings, that is not what the word means. For example, butterfly is not a flying stick of butter. Parking lot is, or not parking lot, driveway. You don't drive on a driveway. You don't park on a parkway, right? So, you could take two words and mash them together and assume that that's what they mean, just their literal meanings, and just putting them together. But that's not always the case. And so when we're looking at things like this, that's just one of the things that we have to be cautious of, is we can't just take, oh, well, this is what the word means, and read that into the text. And so that's why we go to some other evidence that Dain will provide later.
Thank you, both of you. That was wonderful. So going through this introduction and reading these two passages, and also listening to the explanations both from Dain and Shaun, we can understand that there are two or three theories that can be derived from these two passages. One is, of course, very natural one. There's nothing supernatural about these people. They're just skilled men, warriors, specially trained champions that were opposing King David and his army. Okay, no big deal about that. But still, as we know from history, there are some, very good military people that, it's still not a small deal if you go and defeat them. You get special kind of fame. You're being rewarded by your general or the president or the king. So in a way, it's still big of a deal. However, there is another aspect of these passages that we'll be diving soon into, that these could be understood as either giants or something like chimeras. So maybe we can put them in one category. However, being a giant or an entity that is composed of different, where your body is composed of different parts of either animals or humans being combined to something like cherubims, these are not giants. They'll be more of a hybrid being. So that's why I'm saying there are literally two interpretations. One is perfectly natural, humane. Another one would be supernatural. But when it comes to supernatural, it could be understood as either giants or something like a hybrid being. Okay, Dain, when it comes to the ancient relics and symbols, you found something very interesting when it comes to lion and lioness symbolism in ancient Mesopotamia that you would like to share with us.
Yeah, a symbol of warlike deities and kings. So the lion was a metaphor for warrior kings, as I mentioned before, or fierce gods. So there's a human component there. There's also a supernatural component in that the warrior attribute could be assigned to a god or a king. Gods like Ninurta, Inanna, or Ishtar are some names to kind of throw out there in the ancient Near East that were associated with warlike dispositions. And it was also linked to, in the Sumerian tradition, Ningirsu, I think is how you would say it. Another aspect of this is magical protection. So the lion was viewed as a protective force. Lion figurines were buried in foundations or placed in homes for magical defense against sickness and evil. And I actually knew a guy, so other religions across the world have the same practice. I knew a guy that was, I don't know what descent he was, but they had some kind of, he was telling me about it. They had some little totem thing. And when they bought their new house, they buried it in the front yard, and it was for spiritual protection. And this was, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that. Just a normal, everyday guy, IT guy that I worked with. And that was their family belief. So I think it's interesting to see how things like that, where archaeologists are digging up little lion figures in the ruins in Mesopotamia, and we've got a guy in Washington, D.C. burying a totem in his front yard. So good stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that. I always love to hear extra biblical sources, especially when it comes to the ancient Near East, because they help us so much understanding how the ancient Jews used to think and see their world and the cosmos. It helps us with the whole structure of, especially when it comes to supernatural things. I think it's crucial. Thank you for that. But when it comes to also then your biblical references, I know that you also found something about some other bronze silver figurines, and that you mentioned something when it comes to Samson.
Yeah, there was a little blurb from the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. I'll read it here, I'll quote it. Recently found bronze silver figurine from Tel Abu El Karaz, I'm probably butchering these names, in the Transjordan, presenting, according to the excavator's opinion, a male lion-faced warrior god, which can be viewed because of its appearance and its attributes as a male pendant to the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet, which is a lioness god. In addition to this, one might point to a stela found in Kadbun, Syria, depicting Baal standing on a lion. Thus, the same motif, the lion as a riding animal or as an attribute animal. Often gods, I'll break quotes here and just comment on this. Often you would have gods standing on or beside lions to indicate that the attributes of the lion, the fierceness, the warrior aspects of it, the protective aspects of the lion would be an attribute of that god's personality or their actions. Not that the god was a lion, so like the Baal statue wasn't a lion, or the some of these other gods we mentioned earlier, Ninursa, and they're not lions themselves, but they may be depicted with a lion in order to indicate that that's the attributes that god often exhibits. So back to the quote, the lion as a riding animal or as an attribute animal to a male god can also be found on seals, and the Mesha inscription. And the Mesha inscription's kind of a famous inscription with the term RL or Ariel or lion figure associated with it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And before I switch to show this very cool 40,000-year-old lion man figurine, is there anything that you would also like to tell us how the lion is symbolizing some other parts of the ancient cultures?
Yeah, let's see. Let me go back to that part here. Were you What page was that on? I'm sorry. Oh, was this the
4 and
page
5.
4 and 5? Okay, the Near Eastern cross-cultural parallels.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so Mesopotamian and Assyrian kings were often depicted slaying lions as a symbol of divine favor and supernatural strength. Warriors in multiple cultures, Scythian, Germanic, African tribes, for example, engaged in ritualized lion or bear hunts. Key term there, ritualized. They believed that consuming or wearing the animal's remains would invoke power. Lioness deity cult existed in Canaan, possibly referenced in Joshua 15:32 and 19:6. The reason they say that is because the name of the city there is Lebaoth, which is related to a lion deity. And then in Daniel, we've got visions of 4 beasts. One includes a lion. Of course, we know they're the lion imagery in some of the prophetic books and things. In Ezekiel and Revelation, of course, some of the cherubim have faces of lions and things like that. In Israelite archaeology, also, we have a cultic stand that depicts a naked female figure with each of her hands resting on the heads of lions or lionesses flanking her. This figure could be Anat, Asherah, or Astarte, as an opening to the middle, flanked by 2 sphinxes with a lion's body, bird's wings, and a female head. Outside of the two ibexes are 2 lions. The symbol of the tree is an Asherah, the tree named after the goddess Asherah. I guess just that's a quote from the early history of God, and that's a good book to try to understand some of this God imagery and animal imagery. It's The Early History of God, Yahweh, and the Other Deities in Ancient Israel, and that's by Mark Smith.
Thank you so much. I have a question here from Pastor Ben. He's asking, so is there any relation to this usage of the word with Jesus being the lion of the tribe of Judah?
Yeah, man, I think so. I definitely think that if you put yourself in the shoes of the first century Jews having that history, they probably, that probably immediately brings forth certain imagery, royal imagery, warrior imagery, protective imagery, as associated with divinity. And so I do think that for those people at that time, it probably invoked those types of feelings and images in their heads.
Yeah, Shaun, would you like to add anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, he covered that pretty well. The lion is definitely a symbol of protection, power. It's a symbol of kind of might, making right. It's not necessarily concerned with those things that it predates upon. So the symbol for Jesus being the lion would be that he is the most powerful. He just also happens to be the lamb. So, which is very concerned with social dynamics.
Yeah, cool. Thank you both for that. Before we start diving into the first theory, which is the mere natural theory that these were just mere humans, but elite warriors, I just wanted to show you something that both Dana and I found. I found this by coincidence a few weeks ago. There are so many websites.
That thing. That was just, I did that. That was a little Play-Doh statue I did when I was a kid. Sorry.
Yeah.
Couldn't resist. Go on.
Yeah, that's fine. So anyway, there's so many cool articles about this finding, but I found this from BritishMuseum.org to be a very cool one. So it's called The Lion Man, an Ice Age Masterpiece. Okay. Ahead of the exhibition Living with Gods, Jill Cook takes a closer look at one of the exhibition's key loans. The Lion Man, an incredible survival from the last ice age. I'll just read a few sentences. All the links, all the sources we're using are included in the video's description. So, you can look them and, take notes and just enjoy at your own pace. It says the Lion Man is a masterpiece, sculpted with great originality, virtuosity, and technical skill from mammoth ivory. This 40,000-year-old image, younger creationist people triggered, but I didn't warn them on time, so I guess you have to live with this. So this 40,000-year-old image is 31 centimeters tall. Now all my friends, Americans, are triggered. Oh, it's not in inches. So it has the head of a cave lion with a partly human body. He stands upright, perhaps on tiptoes, legs apart and arms to the sides of a slender cat-like body with strong shoulders like the hips and thighs of a lion. His gaze, like his stance, is powerful and directed at the viewer. The details of his face showed that he's attentive, he's watching, and he's listening. He's powerful, mysterious, and from a world beyond ordinary nature. He's the oldest known representation of a being that does not exist in physical form, but symbolizes ideas about the supernatural. So how cool is this figurine? Imagine being found, something being found and well preserved from 40,000 years ago. And it was found in a cave that is now southern Germany, and it was found in 1939. So this was at the dawn of the World War II. So again, it's an amazing finding, and I thought to share this article in the image so people can try in their minds to connect what we're talking about, that this was the imagery of a lion, just like with the serpent or with certain birds. This was well spent in the ancient world. But I was just thinking, since we were talking about this lion, man, maybe people can connect the dots and see some beautiful imagery.
Nico,
so
did you want to clarify that it was found in southern Germany, but we know it was the Serbians that made it?
It's always the Serbs.
Yeah.
What can I say? They have to make another Indiana Jones with us, but we all know it's propaganda, so it may not work. Anyway, so let's start dissecting the first theory, which is not one of those wild theories. This is a merely humane or natural perspective. These were just skilled men warriors. So the question hinges on the meaning of Ariel in Hebrew. If we check the Strong's dictionary and the number is Strong 739, we will see that the meaning of this term means lion of God or being heroic. The term Ariel is used in the Hebrew Bible with multiple meanings. Primarily, it is understood as lion of God or heroic. It is used to refer to a person, a symbolic name for Jerusalem. Yeah, we know passages like this where Jerusalem is called Ariel. And possibly an altar heart. The name suggests strength, courage, and divine association. The word in this passage is spelled the same as the word in Isaiah 33:7, unlike all other instances of the word. It is thus probably better to understand the word in this passage as meaning valiant. But now here is what is interesting. What it seems is that we have a compound word that is actually very common in Hebrew. Ezekiel, Michael, Gabriel, and many other male names all have this L ending, which is actually the word for God combined with another word before it. So Ezekiel would mean God strengthens. Michael means who is like God or who is God, and etc. So it seems that Ariel should mean something like lion of God or lions of God in plural, because we have here two persons. But the word Ariel in general is singular. A better translation would actually mean the two men. Man is implied, man as a plural. So the two men of Ariel, Moab, since two is grammatically inconstruct to Ariel and Moab, which are both the grammatical absolute state and seem to be in opposition to each other. Or perhaps the two men of Ariel of Moab could also be acceptable. I know this can be a little bit dry for people, but I think grammar is important. In other words, Ariel Moab could be a place name or the name of a person or an angel/god with small g. Take a look at Isaiah 29:1. Woe to you, Ariel, Ariel, the city where David settled. And year to year, and let your add year to year, and let your cycle of festivals go on. Clearly here, Ariel is a location, right? It's not a human being. It's certainly nothing divine. So Jerusalem is being called Ariel. So when we just mentioned a few seconds ago that this can also mean, in addition to L, a small g God. Well, this is a possibility because it is very clear from Second Temple Judaism that these EL entities were viewed that way. If it is the name of a god with small g god, then that would indeed suggest that these two men could actually be giants or Nephilim, which would be similar to the Second Temple Jewish thought. But it still seems like a stretch to draw such a conclusion. So this author believes that it's still most probably to conclude that this is just a human, terminology that would depict a human person. It seems more likely that this is actually a place name, Ariel-Moab, or it could even still be more literally lion-like man, but not to mean anything that you may think of, nothing supernatural. Instead, to mean something along as the lines of heroic man of Moab. Any comment on this so far? We can always go first, Dain, and then Shaun.
I was reading somewhere about the place name part of it, that it was referred to as the cosmic mountain, or the mountain of God as well. That was the verbiage they used in the commentary. I don't know how they got to that, but the fact you mentioned Jerusalem, I guess, makes sense kind of with that, right? But I don't know. To me, really, to be honest, this interpretation kind of just makes the most sense intuitively to me, that it meant heroic men of Moab. But I like some of the other ways of looking at it better. It's more entertaining and fun to think about them being giants or hybrids or something. But I kind of think I'm kind of more leaning this way, honestly, but we'll see. Maybe I'll change my mind by the time we're done.
Yeah, I think what's important is to look that when we're looking at the grammar, what we're really doing is we're just exploring what is the semantic range of the possibilities, and then we're creating categories, and then we have to weigh the evidence to see which category it best fits in. So by looking at the grammar, all we're doing is we're saying what it doesn't mean, right? And so we're left with these possibilities of, it could be, real lion-like chimeric creatures. It could be heroic people. It could be, the place name. So there's it gives us these different categories, and it doesn't give us a definitive which one it falls in. It just kind of pares down all the options to these are the categories that we need to be, when we're weighing the evidence, we need to be leaning towards one of these three.
And I'll just add to that too. I think that there's sometimes a temptation, I feel like, to find out the meaning in one passage and then kind of apply that across the board, which is definitely not the case. It's very contextual. It's very much like this passage, it could mean one thing, and another passage it could mean something completely different.
So I have a question for both of you. Have you guys watched The 13th Warrior? It's one of my favorite movies ever.
What was it, Nico?
Have you watched The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas?
Oh, no.
No, but you did, Shaun, right? Okay, so Shaun, remember when so Antonio Banderas is playing this Muslim warrior that is joining Vikings, right? And they're being attacked by these savages that in the distance, but they don't know that there are people, because in the distance they're watching them, and because they're all using torches, it seems like a big, huge, fiery serpent that is moving their way. So they think the enemy is supernatural, because the enemy knows how to camouflage itself to look like the scenery around, but also to have this supernatural aspect by deceiving their enemy to try to scare them. So before we even start, getting data for this episode, I was just thinking about that. When I was like, what if these lion or lion-like warriors? What if they're just regular people like us, but just dressed maybe to have a lion mask or a costume or something, and then elite warriors in fighting, so that the other enemy, their enemies, for example, Jews in this example, would be scared of them and see them as lions. They're like, oh wow, they're lion-like men, not supernatural, but like they're resembling their territory. They're resembling, this is maybe their totem animal or their sacred animal or animal that protects them, supposedly spirit animal, whatever. So in that case, I was thinking, could it be that just it's like they're called lion men because they're maybe not as strong as them, or maybe they're not mutants or hybrids, but they're simply resembling the era where maybe lion was specifically significant for them, and maybe they were dressed in that way to scare the opponent. And I was like, man, 13 warrior makes perfect sense, because once when you parallel with this, I'm like, for me, that made the best interpretation, of this passage so far. And Shaun, because you watched the movie, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah. So first of all, when you're saying that, I'm immediately thinking of the Norse berserkers, right? So these were people who they would dress in very minimal clothing, and they would make themselves look as ferocious as possible. And this is a really common tactic in melee warfare, to make yourself as imposing as possible on your enemy. I mean, that's the reason that the winged hussars wore those wings on their back in their cavalry charges, because I mean, it would basically look like God was coming to kick your butt. You had this huge army, and they're making themselves just look bigger. So this very common tactic, and it would totally make sense. Also, what you said about the totems, about warriors dressing like the totem that, or the animal that they're spiritually attuned with or descended from. I think we see some of that in indigenous cultures, where you have these different elaborate war garments or dresses that they would put on. So I mean, and this doesn't necessarily discount the idea that they could be either common people, or they could be supernatural origin. Either way, they would both fit into this category of wanting to dress in such a way that would be imposing. They would want to pay homage to the spirit that they come from, and what they as a people identify with. So I mean, I think that's 100%.
Yeah, and also what I was thinking is that, many times we as human species, we mimic animals. Like, if a guy wants to impress a girl, he would try to bring her something. We see this, or try to dress nice. So with this also in the animal world, we see an animal that is stronger than a male animal that is stronger than others will win the female. Or if it's like a special type of bird with beautiful feathers, if it spreads all the these colorful feathers, it will impress the female. But also on the other side, in the animal world, if they would be facing an opponent, sometimes animals would stand on their two legs, trying to be more intimidating, bigger, longer than they are, to try to scare. So I'm thinking this is another perfect resemblance of how people would try to intimidate other warriors, other tribes. So it's like, let me show you how I'm big and strong by yelling at you, by having all these colors, and trying to look like as if I'm not from this world. Actually, I'm perfectly 100% human, but I'm going to try to like make these sounds. I have these colors and resemble this animal, or maybe this demon, or maybe this deity, so that I can try to psychologically have influence on you and scare you. So I think that could also be the case, even though, of course, I don't know 100%, but to me, before we start diving into the supernatural aspect of these theories, to me that made the most logical sense. I know, Dain, that you didn't watch the movie, but is there anything you'd like to add on this?
Just agree with Shaun on the berserkers thing, and certainly think that's it's definitely something that ancient warriors did. It's a war tactic, and also a temple ritual thing as well. I did find a relief example where priests were wearing lion pelts. I think I added that in the raw notes part. So there's also there's an example of people wearing lion pelts, I guess is what that tells you. It's in a worship context, but I could easily see how it would be in a warlike context also. So
I'm thinking of somebody wearing lion pelts in a war context. My mind immediately goes to Hercules, right? Because he
exactly
had the war pelt that he wore around, and that was his battle garb. So absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're muted, Nico.
I'm sorry. I was just saying I wanted to show the photo, well, actually photos of something that you guys were talking about so that people can visually try to put together what we're talking about. So this is still happening, right, in some African tribes. And I think this perfectly resembles what we're talking about, right? So we can see these lion pelts still worn by some, including Native Americans, right? And it's not just a lion. Here we see jaguar. I believe people would still do it with tigers, with whatever for them looks as a powerful enemy. Here we see wolf on the right side, bear skin. So people will do this because it will be a symbol of royalty, power, courage, also to intimidate others. Here we see on the left side some king that is choosing not to be dressed in a tuxedo, but choosing to be dressed in a lion pelt, because for him that's special and it would resemble something when it comes to his tribe and his past, the clan that he belongs to, how they would see these things. So I think this is a beautiful example of what we're talking about.
I think it's kind of interesting. Oh, sorry, Nico.
No, that's fine.
I think it's interesting how, like, I feel like maybe as 21st century Westerners, we look at that and we think, oh, big deal, he's wearing a lion pelt or whatever, because we look at it as clothing. But it's interesting to try to like imagine how they might look at it differently, how the spiritual significance they might assign to that, and how that might make them feel when they see people dressed in pelts of different kinds. I can't even begin to understand what that is like, but I feel like there's definitely something there to understand that's significant here with that whole concept of wearing skins and what that does to the enemy and what that does to your own ability to muster strength when needed in war, or feelings of invincibility or whatever,
Well, and I was gonna say, as you were talking about that, we've heard the saying, the clothes make the man, and it's so interesting that just a couple hundred years ago in our culture, your status, everything about your identity was you would be able to tell just by looking at the clothing that you wore. So for us, where we are such, I mean, it's not even, I wouldn't even say Western. I think it probably started with America, where we got rid of the titles and all that. And so you were just free to wear what you wanted. The idea that, well, it's just garments. It's just something that you're using to cover your nakedness with. But, for the vast majority of human history, that was not the case. And so we're actually the ones who have a backwards view on that. When you are putting on this garb, you are putting on an identity. And in fact, the Bible, thinking about that, the Bible uses that of, put on Christ and, having the,
Good point.
like, yeah, I mean, that's crazy. I didn't even think about that till right now.
That's a great point. That's awesome. That's totally true.
Well, I really enjoyed this exchange of ideas. So we're going back to still dissecting this theory that these were just men. Probably the best treatment of this passage would come from mingling of the NIV and King James. The NIV translated Ariel by the phrase best men, as in men of might and valor, while the King James used lion-like men or lion-like heroes. When taken in context, something along these lines would be the better translation. The passage in 1 Chronicles 11:40-47 speaks of the man that David considered mighty, as well as some of their exploits. The record of Benaiah in verses 22-25 states that he killed the two Ariel along with a lion and an Egyptian giant whose height measured about 7.5 feet. I think this is very interesting. And now we're starting to get another layer in the story, like why this story could be also seen from supernatural aspects. Therefore, the best rendition of Ariel is probably something that conveys might and strength, more so than what best men or lion-like men convey, that they were mighty men who fought like lions from God. In the Old Testament, the image of a lion was used often to express power and strength when describing warriors. Soldiers from the tribe of Gad were described in 1 Chronicles 12:8 as having faces like the faces of lions. David's lament for Saul and Jonathan called the deceased stronger than lions in 2 Samuel 1:23. Proverbs 30:30 describes the lion is mighty among beasts. So perhaps these Ariel were a special elite corps in the army of the Moabites, similar to our special forces like US Navy SEALs and something like that. They also could have been two men who referred to themselves as the Ariel in reference to their abilities as warriors. Likewise, it could have been an epithet given to them by their enemies. Whatever the reason, these men must have been known as some of the fiercest fighters because they were compared to the king of the jungle, the mighty lion. Defeating two of them obviously was a feat worthy of mentioning in the list of mighty men. It is very hard for a single English word to convey the idea of warriors that go by lions of God, but it is obvious that they were considered some of the mightiest of men in that day. Okay, Shaun, when it comes to also humane aspect, that this could be, something, not supernatural, but still natural. There's this expression which is very hard for me because it's Latin to pronounce, something like Leontiasis osea. What is it to this term that you would like to, share with you on this? And let me see also if I can share the link. Okay, yeah, it's right here.
Yeah, the term Leontiasis osea is a recently coined, I think it's like an anthropological term that describes a bone disorder in which a person has these bony tumors that grow all over their face, and it also affects their teeth. And so they end up with these protruding mandibles and maxilla, where they actually take on the form of something monstrous like a lion. And so you can see in some of the skulls of the people who have this, where it's just kind of like this hollow bony substance outside of the more rigid, hard bone that is skeletal bone, that this is something that would be really difficult for a person to survive very long with, because of the fact that it would get in the way, it would impede your ability to eat. So it wasn't something that would be, super fun to have. But we do have people even today that have this sort of disorder, and so it's just interesting that this is a medical diagnosis. We know people who have faces that kind of look like lions.
Yeah, as I'm going through the article, I can't help but feel sad for people who are born with all these deformities, and the science is so limited with how much they can help them. But there are like all these medical words, which of course can't pronounce and I can't understand. But as always, all the links are included, so please check them for yourself. Okay, Shaun, and also there is this another interesting terminology about some congenital hypertrichosis terminalis. What is it about this, another medical expression that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, this is a dermatological condition in which a person is born with an excess amount of hair and it just continues to grow. The terminalis refers to the kind of hair, so it's like the fully developed hair. So this person has hair growth all across their body, and it's sometimes referred to as werewolf syndrome. And they have long hair that basically covers them from head to toe. There have been some pretty famous people that we know of that have had it. There was one, I forget his name, Peter something. Well, there's actually a portrait of him, and I mean, he looks like a werewolf man. Another one was in the early 1900s. His name was Lionel the Lion-Faced Man, and he was traveling with I think it was the Barnum and Bailey circus. He was referred to as the Lion Man, and his body was, there's a picture of him, was completely covered with hair. it didn't affect his mental faculties. He spoke 5 languages fluently. But yeah, he was just kind of a, I don't want to say freak, but that's what they would have called him. And it's a really rare, sad oddity. That's a case of the leontiasis osseous that you can see where the front of the face is protruding because of those bone tumors, and you can see why somebody would associate that with a lion-like face.
Yeah, especially when I see children born like that, it's such a sad story, because what is their hope for their, yeah, they can go to school, they can hopefully find jobs, but when it comes to some happiness in life, or finding a mate, or finding friends who wouldn't like mock them, such a sad story. And no, I mean, no wonder in the past when people used to mock people like this and just put them outside of their group of friends and society and events. The only hope for people like this back in the past will be like, they will have to be accepted and loved by the church, and they could have worked in circuses, and that's so sad. So I'm thankful that at least nowadays, when kids are born like that, science has advanced so much compared to centuries ago. And even if they cannot cure them, but at least they won't be kicked out from the society as back in the Jesus time, like as the lepers. So it's just something sad. Okay, so I think this was covered enough so far when it comes to this like the natural or the humane background of these warriors. When it comes to the second theory, that for some people could be too wild or too fringy, it is what it is. Let's deal with giants, okay? So some consider that these Ariel were lion-like men, which makes sense in the context of this section of 2 Samuel, which lists the exploits of David's mighty men in defeating various warriors and giants. Rashi, who was the famous Jewish rabbi, and I think he lived in the medieval times, so a lot of Orthodox Jews, whenever they have to deal with the interpretation of the Old Testament, which is for them the only Bible they recognize, they would always go first to Rashi. So Rashi was who is for us now. I don't know. Let's take your favorite theologian or pastor nowadays. That you first go to him, whoever he is. That this was for the Jews and still is. So Rashi. So Rashi is specifically saying that these were 2 Moabite giants. And when Rashi says something, the Jews believe, not all, but Orthodox Jews would believe his understanding, because he was taken. Imagine when Paul was saying of himself that he was like the Jew of the Jews. So see something like that Rashi has position in the Jewish Orthodox world. So there is certain weight when Rashi comes in his commentary saying, hey, 2 Samuel, yeah, that speaks of 2 Moabite giants. And people would accept that, like, wow, like, this means something. In terms of their origin, we know little other than they came from Moab. If there were giants, and this is very interesting, they may have been Anakim, the descendants from Arba through Anak. We see this in Joshua 21:11. These people were driven out by Joshua, but apparently survived in Moab until the time of the Judges, Judges 1:20. The Jewish Encyclopedia says they were. Then they moved to Moab, the location of the encounter mentioned in 2 Samuel 23. If the 2 men called Ariel, we know as Anakites, but we can call them as Anakites, but not Moabites, then their origin, biblically speaking, would be this relationship of incest between Lot and one of his daughters, which we can read in Genesis 19:37. A third possibility is that these men were of mixed race or ethnicity, part Anakite and part Moabite. And of course, this is not to be taken, everything's like, oh, this is 100% true. This is what Bible commentaries and people who like to read and research are coming with different solutions, like what if, or this is not impossible. But we're not claiming that this is like 100% true. In First Chronicles, we can see that these 3 warriors of David were killing at an astronomical level. One of them killed 300 men. And this is not a metaphor. This is not an exaggeration. This is not hyperbole. He killed up around 300 men by either using a spear or just lifting it up, quote unquote. So they were fighting on a heavenly, almost not so humane level. Now think, if one of these three could kill 300 men and not faint from exhaustion, why would the Bible mention that the men of that caliber were fighting and killing just 2 people? Because they most probably were not just mere people. The word that the Bible uses to describe these men is exactly what they are: human mixed with a lion DNA, hybrids, maybe Rephaim. A few verses down, the same warrior is killing an Egyptian that is 7.5 feet tall and has a spear that is compared to a weaver's beam. This is David's time. He literally fights the Philistines in a place called the Valley of the Rephaim. Dain, when it comes to your section of Were Lion Men Nephilim on pages 6 and 7, what is it that you would like to add on this?
Let me get down there quick. Yeah, so I think there's a couple of ways of looking. I mean, I'm sure there's more than a couple, but here's 2 ways that I think we could look at this. First is that it's oral traditions of a real event, that happened in the past. So when we're talking about giants, right, versus maybe a literary way of looking at it. So it's either something that happened in the past and then now we're writing about it after the fact, or it could be just an inspired response to some of the things that were going on at the time. Now, when we're talking about, in particular, 2 Samuel, we're not talking about Second Temple period. So it's a little bit different than if we were talking about, some of the things in First Enoch and stuff when it comes to giants, because Enoch was written in Second Temple period. But I guess I just wanted to read a couple of blurbs here. Certainly deities like Asherah and Ishtar are mentioned by Dr. Heiser, bring up Dr. Heiser, as gods over the nations according to the Divine Council worldview. Therefore, it's reasonable to assume that the lioness cult at Lebaoth, which was what I mentioned earlier, and the nations that worshipped Ishtar and Asherah were directing that worship to a disgraced Divine Council members. In other words, these deities were gods in not the angelic sense, but in the principalities and powers sense. They were very powerful godlike beings without God's omni-X attributes of making him the highest god, but still very, very powerful, regional gods, real gods. And we have idol worship as a representative body for the deity as well. So when we talk about those gods actually existing, and then people worshiping them in the form of Ishtar or Asher or whatever the name was, the idea of idol worship comes into it. And the idol is then a representative body for that deity. So whether the people were communicated with spiritually from the deity, and then they said, build me an idol to inhabit, or maybe it's something else. Maybe they're just doing it without really being told anything, and they're just being spiritually influenced and they don't realize it. But my point of saying all this is that lioness form, or the lion form, could also have been representative of a trait they saw in a god similar to a lioness. In other words, maybe there's a vision of build me a humanoid looking idol, or maybe there's no vision, and rather just because they're in that milieu of the ancient Near East, and lion is something important to them that stands for all of these attributes that we're sort of mentioning, warriorness and protectiveness and things. They're building this idol because they want a particular god to reside in that idol, and they think that building a lion is going to attract that god into that idol as part of their ceremonies and things. Yeah, so I guess that's just kind of the point I wanted to make. Were they Nephilim? I think that we could view it that way, just in the general sense of the Divine Council worldview, where we know that. Well, I say Nephilim. Maybe I don't mean. Okay, were the lion men Nephilim? Okay, so maybe we should define that, right? What's Nephilim? Nephilim is offspring of the Watchers. The Watchers were the deities, and Nephilim were the DNA sort of experiment that the spiritual deities mated with human women and produced this offspring. And then I think it's reasonable to assume, maybe not, that then those Nephilim, those giants, or the offspring of the Watchers and the women, then they went ahead and did some additional experimenting. We do know that they educated people in dark arts and things like that. So it's possible that maybe they did some interbreeding with lions, and you've got these giants with lion attributes, kind of like Island of Dr. Moreau type stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's just some thoughts on that. But I think it's interesting when we think about, we talk a lot about, when we talk about Nephilim and Dr. Heiser and giants and things like that, a lot of that's based on First Enoch. And First Enoch is, was written during the Second Temple period, at least the parts of it that we usually reference. But Second Samuel was not. And some of these other verses we're talking about was not. And so that makes me think, well, they're not writing from the aspect of the first Enoch viewpoint. So either that viewpoint didn't take shape during the Second Temple period only, and that's a viewpoint that existed all throughout history and was transmitted through oral form, this divine council worldview sort of theology, or it could be that what we're dealing with is, not really that type of mindset at all, and it's more lion means all these things we're talking about, protective, warrior class, things like that. So just kind of thinking of it in those terms, we basically have to remember the time period that it's being written, and what is the viewpoint of the author, and what's the intended recipient supposed to think. And I'm not sure if giants and Nephilim and that sort of thing would have been factored in during Second Samuel time period, but I could be wrong.
One thing that I wanted to say following what Dain had said is that it's not just, sanctified imagination that the Nephilim would have gone out and done these things with the animals. We actually have in the pseudepigrapha, we have the Book of Jubilees that specifically lists the things that the sons of the Watchers did. Of course, we don't know who wrote this or when it was written, but it is fairly ancient. I think that there was a copy of that found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, if I'm correct. And it says, this is leading up to the flood. It lists the sons of the Watchers, and it says, and after this they sinned against the beasts and the birds and all that moves and walks on the earth, and much blood was shed on the earth, and every imagination and desire of men imagined vanity and evil continually. And then the Lord went on to destroy the world, right? So we actually do have an old document that said that the descendants of the Watchers did go and do these things with the animals, and it was that caused God to destroy the whole world and keep only those animals and men that were perfect in their bloodline. So yeah, it's not just sanctified imagination that Dain is going on here. We actually have document evidence that says that this was definitely one of the ideas of how these things came about.
Yeah, I also want to say that this comment by our brother and friend Paul Ali is very good one. He says there were Nephilim in the family of Moab, Amalek, grandson of Moab, tied to Lotan, not related to Anak by blood, but same characteristics. Why not the Ariel in the same way? That's a good point. It's a good question. I don't know if you guys have any comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I definitely think there's something going on with that as a whole. I'm just not sure how strong of evidence there is that this particular passage gives us that insight, other than we can say, well, that was this whole idea of giants and Nephilim blood, in these different people groups like the Rephaim and stuff like that. That is definitely part of their culture. And so in that sense, we could say, well, it's just part of the milieu of ancient Israel. Of course, they're going to factor that in. Of course, that's part of, especially if we're talking about Moabite or essentially Arab, even though Arab wasn't a thing yet, but, non-Israelite tribe peoples would I probably be just in general by default often thought of in those terms. So I think we could go there from that aspect. But if we want to only focus on the text, and that I'm not so sure. To me, I'm still not convinced that like Ariel in that context is really a nod to giant clan type activity. It could be. I'm not saying it's not. I just don't see something right there in the text or surrounding the text. But maybe it's there, and I'm just not picking up on it too. So. But definitely a possibility, though.
Okay, if Shaun has nothing to comment, then maybe Dain, you can continue by briefly summarizing your section of the divine bodies, which I thought it's interesting because it brought another layer to the topic.
Yeah. So this idea that the deities are fluid in ancient Israel theology, we have this. We probably people watching. It looks like everybody's probably in on the Heiser train. So I think everyone has kind of like heard of the angel of the Lord and this idea of theophanies and divine fluidity. So ancient Israelite would have allowed a more flexible or fluid concept of divinity than later traditions. Yahweh could manifest in multiple bodies simultaneously while still being a singular deity. So he could be in the temple, he could be in heaven, he could be in a theophanic form like the angel of the Lord all at the same time. Makes him still one God, he just is in different places. And you could compare, and this is very, very true of Mesopotamian and Canaanite religion. So the Canaanite gods, Yahweh was understood to be present in multiple locations at once, just like they were. And I think that applies to the divine lion man or lioness aspects too. So we're not talking necessarily about this passage, but in some of the gods, and I have a list here. Maybe I don't know if we're going to go over it or not, but there's a whole list of different lion deities, lion and lioness deities that in some of these different cultures over the period of thousands of years depicted in stone or in idol form or in the literature. And I think that this divine fluidity probably applies to them just like any other god. I can't say that for sure, but I think just as a general term, it does. And so if we could tie that back to the passage that we're talking about, I'm not sure that we can, but I guess that sort of brings up the question of, are these just men, or are these god men of some kind, or maybe a theophany form of a god? And I know people like Gary Wayne, which I don't really like Gary Wayne, but he's brought up like the term race, where you have a race of giants people or a race of gods or demigods and things like that. So anyways, I just thought the divine fluidity concept was probably applicable to this in some ways.
Yeah, thank you for that. The last data or source of information for tonight when it comes to the giants comes from Brian Godava's article, and it's so funny how I found it, and Shaun also found it in his research, because Brian Godava is coming in 5 weeks again on the podcast, and he was the one who emailed me and offered to come, and I was like, yeah, please, of course, come. So
Awesome.
that was so cool, and I'm excited about him coming. So his article is titled "Of Myth and the Bible, Part 10, The Lion Man of Moab." I'm just going to read a few passages. The Hebrew word for mighty warrior, Giborim, is used frequently throughout David's narrative, and that word is not here. The text says 2 Ariels of Moab. However, I have to say that even though, based on Godava's research, the Gibborim is not used for these two entities. It's still used for David's army. And you have to wonder, because this, this title is not just used randomly, like for just people who are like, let's say me or you guys, right? These were people that were usually have to be in some way connected to something like Nephilim bloodline and descendants. We see that Nimrod was called I think Gibor is a singular word. Giborim would be plural. So many researchers are thinking that even Nimrod was one of the giants or Nephilim. For me, I don't know, because we don't have so much information about him, but I'm open to that interpretation. So now there's this path that is opening. Okay, if David's men were partly whatever, but they were not like, maybe let's say they were not like people like you and me. If they were like specially strong, specially empowered to fight, one kill 300 with a spear, how big of an accomplishment would be that this band of David's special elite warriors would kill two elite warriors of Moab. I mean, it's still an accomplishment, but is it worthy to be mentioned, to be like, this skill, this trophy is bringing me certain fame? I would think, and I would expect that if I'm mentioning something, like I would want to mention an opponent on my level or even stronger, like in the case of David and Goliath. So if I conquered, Goliath, that's a big thing. If I conquer someone who is beneath me, that's even not worth mentioning. But anyway, I'm going to skip a little bit, and I'm going to start with here. Psalm 57 was written as David was on the run and hiding out in a cave from Saul's bounty hunters. Verse 4 says, "My soul is in the midst of lions. I lie down amid fiery beasts, the children of man, whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords." Though a surface reading of this text appears to be an obvious figurative expression of David's enemies, scholar B. Mazar suggests that it may be a reference to a mercenary military corps of archers whose emblem was the lion goddess. Could they have come from Moab? So what if these Ariels are hybrid creatures reminiscent of the Watchers' miscegenation is in Genesis 6? What if they're elite warriors with hairy bodies and lion-like faces that only one of the David's own Gibborim, mighty men, could slay? After all, the exploits of those mighty men in the passages we have been looking at are supernatural slayings of giants and hundreds of soldiers by a single warrior, which was my point. Like, why mentioning something? It's like, let me say I can kick this bottle. Would I brag about that to my friends? No, but if I would say, hey, I did this, which is like astonishing, they'll be like, wow. But for me, smashing this bottle, it would be like, why even mentioning that? That would be embarrassing. So there's something to this. There is a logical train of thoughts, I think, with this. If these Ariels were mere warriors, then the feat accomplished by Benaiah in slaying them would be the only one in the entire passage that was banal and without significance. These Ariels were something more than men, something supernatural. The ancient understanding of Ariel as a lion-like hybrid humanoid finds support in a later Nag Hammadi text that speaks of agnostic deity Yaldabaoth, who was an Ariel, spelled slightly different. Ariel is what the perfect call him, for he was like a lion. The Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible says of this possible religious mythical interpretation of Ariel. I would just ask you guys to turn the sound, because, Dain, from you, there's a feedback coming. If you can please just turn your soundness. Okay, I did it for you, don't worry. Because there was a feedback coming in the last 5 minutes. So the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible says of this possible religious mythical interpretation of Ariel. This interpretation could be supported by a recently found bronze-silver figurine from Tel Abu al-Kharaz in Transjordan, representing, according to the excavator's opinion, a male lion-faced warrior/god, possibility, which can be viewed because of its appearance and its attributes as a male pendant. The author then reveals that the word Ariel shows up in the Mesha stele, which was something that Shaun mentioned recently, a Moabite stone inscription not too long after the time of King David. These are the very Moabites from which 2 Samuel says the Ariels come. The line of text in question could be translated, the lion figure, Ariel, of their beloved God, which was dragged before Chemosh after the fall of the Israelite city. And we know Chemosh to be one of the pagan deities. Bible scholar B. Mazar notes this Mesha stele connection and adds that the word Ariel became a synonym for the lion-headed cherubim at the base of kingly thrones. Very interesting. Okay, I'm going to skip this because he's comparing with his novel. Okay, this is very interesting. The ancient book of Jasher, or Yasher, I don't know what is the pronunciation, maybe there are different ones, was a source text for both Joshua and David's stories. The extant version we have of the book of Yasher or Jasher, though dubious, tells of 2 different stories that contain hybrid creatures that may be similar to the lion man of Moab or the satyrs of Banias. In Jasher 36, 29, 35, we read of Ahhhh, one of the sons of Seir the Horite. Remember the Seirites' connection to satyrs. During the days of Abraham, there is a large storm that the writer says caused a group of about 120 great and terrible animals to come out of the forest by the seashore to be witnessed by Ahhhh feeding his donkeys. I don't want to read all of this. The article is available. Another chapter in Jasher or Yasher tells the story during the youth of Balaam, son of Beor, about a strange animal that was devouring the cattle of the people of Chittim. A man named Zepho went in search of this creature, and he came into the cave and looked, and behold, a large animal was devouring the ox. From the middle upward, it resembled a man, and from the middle downward, it resembled an animal. And Zepho rose up against the animal and slew it with his swords. Were these creatures mere legends, or were they genetic hybrid remnants of the miscegenation of the Watchers? And of course, he's suggesting his novel, and he's pointing a lot of his sources. So before we switch to the last possible, wild theory, that will be, okay, let's say these are not giants, but some sort of hybrid animals or something like chimeras. What is your comment on what I've been reading, especially coming from Gadala? Yeah, you're muted because I was muting you because the feedback was coming in.
Weird.
Okay, fine.
How about now?
Yeah, I unmuted you. You can mute and unmute yourself in the StreamYard in the lower left corner.
Yeah, I have a weird kind of setup here, so it's challenging for me to get to that. But yeah, I mean, I like Gadawa. I like his books about the backgrounds to his novels better than I shouldn't say I don't like his novels. I haven't actually read his novels yet, but I just don't read novels because I just don't feel like I have the time for that. But I've been wanting to, and I think that he does solid research. So I definitely take stock in anything that he puts out, and it's very interesting. Sometimes I feel like the point about you made the point with the water bottle where it's like, oh, if I kick this, it's just a water bottle, big deal. I mean, yeah, that's a good point, but at the same time, back to the significance that people place on things in different cultures. If we talked about wearing the lion pelts earlier, and how someone wears a lion pelt versus a wolf pelt, and it's like, oh, he's got a lion pelt, holy cow, we gotta avoid that guy, whereas we'd be like, dude, lion pelt, okay, like, I don't care, sure, if you like that, if that's your deal or whatever, so it's kind of different. I feel like maybe they would see the lion pelt warriors in a more awful, an awestruck way, and defeating these guys who were, if they're elite, like Delta Force type guys, that is a big deal. And so it is worth writing about. And ancient people would write about all kinds of things defeating, and they'd exaggerate too, oftentimes. So there could be an aspect of that as well. But like I said, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate tonight. I'm finding myself, I didn't expect to be doing this, but because I'm normally very, it's the giants, it's the Nephilim, all that sort of thing. But I'm finding myself playing devil's advocate tonight. I don't know why. But yeah, I think I think Brian's work is good. So it's definitely worth reading and checking out. I'd be excited to read that, especially after doing this.
Yeah, I also want to say that before we went live last night, Shaun and I were chatting, and we're like, most probably these were men. So it's like we're also skeptical. We're like, yeah, we would wanted to think that these were like some special creatures, but we don't know. Like there's data here and there, but we were still leaning on that humane side. But it's still fun to checking. So what you said, Dain, about playing the advocate, devil's advocate role. I was doing the same a month ago when I had Shaun and was it Jared when we were talking about the fog? I was like, I think the fog is merely natural. Yeah, it's thick, it stays for days, but I think it's merely natural. Now, can it caught on smoke and something? If it's in the air, some dirt, some garbage, if they're spraying something, I don't know. But I'm just saying I think it's of natural origin. So it's perfectly fine to take that side. Like, yeah, I don't know, but I think it's more this. So I think it's perfectly fine for you to go against whoever, even your favorite scholar or pastor, of course, because we're being respectful. We're saying, I still don't know. I'm still not completely assured, despite the evidence. So
and it's more rooted in, for me, it's more just rooted in the text, the passage itself, and the absence of, more to point that direction than what there is. And so while I see the Ariel thing definitely points in different contexts to, possibly divinity. In this context, just the way it's worded within, in the passage feels more natural to me for whatever reason. But I think Gadawa's got some good stuff, so maybe he'll change my mind.
Yeah, I live on Team Supernatural, so like for me, like Nico was saying, we were discussing this last night, and I was like, man, I'm bummed that there's not more evidence, because I was like, I so want them to be like Lion Man cryptids. Like, I'm ready to go Lion Man hunting in Texas. Like, let me go. But no, I agree with you. I'm thinking that, grammatically, anthropologically, it's just, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't lean that way. I so wish it would. And that's not to say that what Gadawa is producing isn't plausible. It is. I mean, it totally is. But I just don't think that the evidence leans really hard that way. Secondly, to the water bottle analogy, look, if I were to beat a Navy SEAL in a wrestling match, I'm making T-shirts. Like, everybody will know. So it's not like, I mean, it can totally be a human. But these guys, I mean, it's not like the options are, like demigod status versus just regular, Bob the plumber. Like, assuming that they were human, they would have been like epic, right? And so beating them would have been tantamount to beating a giant. So I mean, the guys that sided with David could kill 300 men. That's almost as awesome as, Shamgar with an ox goad, right? Like, these guys are pretty epic. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you bring up the supernatural, you live on Team Supernatural. And I kind of, when I think about this stuff too, I think, well, the supernatural is very blendy with the temporal or the physical. So it's like when we have supernatural experiences, they're physical experiences, and there's something about the experience that we can't explain. And that's obviously why it's supernatural. So when we say supernatural, maybe what we're talking about is this preternatural or not, in the sense of, is this a lion human hybrid, like physical being, not a theophany, which would be more supernatural. But maybe, you know, just the act of killing these elite warriors that wear the lion pelts, there's a supernatural aspect to that, in that God empowered them to do that. And you know, in the heat of the moment, the Gibberim, you know, whatever his name is, that starts with a B, I can't pronounce it. The guy who kills the lion men. In the eyes of the lion men, he became, you know, empowered with the power of Yahweh, and it was a supernatural thing. And you experience that, and everybody knows it was supernatural. And people now, we say it's a God thing. Oh, that was such a God thing that we, you know, got this house because everything lined up, and my family was able to get everything they needed, and it just seemed like things happened all that they were designed that way, and it couldn't be coincidence. It's a God thing. And so, you know, I think always it's possible that when these things happened in antiquity, they knew it was a God thing, and they wrote about it. It was more than just, you know, I'm going to brag about this because we beat your guys, your stupid guys with the lion pelts. Like, big deal. We just totally slayed you guys, and we're going to write about it, and this is going to be in the legends forever. Boom. You know, it's more than that. I mean, it's that too, but it's also a supernatural thing. And for the believers that believe in that, it's just for the same reason that we believe the Bible is inspired too. So I'm not saying there's not a supernatural aspect, but maybe it's less preternatural in some aspects and more supernatural in the way I described. I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, Dain, you inspired me to think of the movie 300 and the King Leonidas. So
I
let's
haven't
say,
seen that. I want to see that so bad.
yeah. So let's say,
Yeah.
according to your understanding and logic, which makes sense. Let's say David's mighty men, Gibberim, they fought these two people. What if these two people were on that level of like King Leonidas? King Leonidas was not divine at all, but he was so skilled that he could have beat any other army, tons of them, not by himself, but his group of 300 people resisted tens of thousands of people, right? So what if they were on that level? So then it made sense that they were mentioned in the Bible, because like, hey, we defeated their elite champions, because these were like the top level fighters in the region, not just, you know, in the Moab, but just in the region. Also, the second thing that crossed my mind is like, what if they were people, regular people, but because all of the nations, all of the tribes had their own deities, what if they were like supernaturally empowered, not through the lion pelt, but in general? What were they were supernaturally empowered through their shamans, through their you know, priests, to get help from their local deities, and then to fight with supernatural strength, like we would see with possessed people, or we would see like Shaun mentioned berserkers. I think now, even though I didn't even think about this, but now I'm thinking like that's also in a way plausible. So if Yahweh empowered Samson, or Yahweh empowered you know, King David's army to defeat, you know, 300 people or thousands of people, was it Samson who used the bone of a donkey, right? So if that happened, like, then, well, maybe just like when Moses was performing miracles and the magicians of Egypt were able to, you know, perform miracles as well, maybe these fighters of Moab had special blessing from their gods, and they're able to fight back and to show supernatural, not just skill but strength, and to oppose. Maybe they're on the same level, Gibberim, like David's, you know, mighty men, because maybe they got some special anointing or blessing from their deities. I think that's possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I really like that idea that this was something that was definitely supernatural, even though the people themselves maybe were not more than human. There was something more than just human, you know, combat competence and vigor going on, that there was some sort of you know, divine or quasi-divine impartation of like demonic power that these things would have had. I really like that idea.
Don't steal it from me, please. I plan to sell it to Godava when he sells more novels. Yeah, this is good that Amber wrote. She said that elite warriors of that caliber would have been considered at minimum blessed or anointed by their deity. Thank you for that confirmation. I didn't know that. I didn't know the source of this would be true. I was just thinking it's very logical and plausible. So thank you for confirming that. Okay, now we're switching to the last possible theory, even though for some people it's the wildest one, when we come to hybrid entities or something like chimeras. And Dane, this is where I would ask you to switch to the lion hybrid creatures on pages 1 and 2, and then you can also continue to the lioness on page 2 and Sphinx tradition also on page 2.
Okay. You can hear me? I came off mute.
Yes.
Okay. So lion hybrid creatures, there's a lion centaur. This is all spanning between ancient Samaria all the way up through ancient Israel. So lion centaur, Halulu. Some of these Sumerian names are like the Lulu on the ends of them, on the end of all of them. But lion centaur, a lion-bodied human torso creature. Okay, like a centaur, just instead of a horse on the bottom, it's a lion. Protecting against demons is its function. Lion demon, so a hybrid with a lion's head, donkey ears, and bird feet. Lion dragon or a lion griffin, a male deity or demon appearing possibly linked to certain other gods. Lion humanoid, Uridimu. And so it was the Uridimu and the Urmahalulu, so the lion centaur and the lion humanoid. Those were the two that seemed to be closest to what we were talking about. The lion's lower body, so in the Uridimu, the lion humanoid, the lion's lower body and a human upper body, connected to the god Marduk as a protective minor deity. And so sometimes these animal-human hybrid gods are more like flanking a major god, or they provide a function for a major god. And then lion skins and rituals, and we already talked about that, sort of the whole shaman aspect of it. Gilgamesh, the story of Gilgamesh, he also wore a lion skin that gave him power. You mentioned Hercules earlier, Shaun. I had that down here. And then I had a picture of it there of, it was actually a picture of, I don't know if I have I guess I can't show it. But anyways, there were priests wearing lion skins.
Is it in Sphinx?
No, it's, let's see here. Yeah, it's just, I had the image in the document, but I don't know if I can share it. So I'll just continue on here.
Yeah, is it page 11 or it's page 2?
It's page 1. At the bottom of page 1, there's an image there.
Okay, let me try to share it, because
if you double click on it, it's a picture out of this book, and Dictionary of Demons and Deities in the Bible is really good, but also this book, Gods, Demons, and Symbols in Ancient Mesopotamia by Jeremy Black is a really good one too, and it's a little less systematic than DDD, but the nice thing about it is there's a lot of pictures and explanations that aren't in DDD, so that's a good one if you want to pick that up. But
yeah, and these are like female deities, right? Sekhmet and Tefnut.
Yeah, so under the Sphinx tradition in Egypt, you've got lion-headed deities associated with war, with plague, with divine retribution. So along that theme again of sort of war and warlikeness. This one, they're responsible for water and moisture. I guess that's a little bit different, but Egyptians were a little bit different. Tefnut is that name, and Sekhmet is the other name. And then, so the lioness deity, Lavaot, warlike goddesses and military symbolism, appears as a deity or personal name in Canaanite. So the name is Lavaot or Labaoth, and this is means lioness. And this is an Canaanite, so Ugaritic basically, but it's also in Babylonian, Assyrian, and Akkadian traditions. And this is the name that I mentioned in Joshua 15:32 and 19:6, where it's a place name, but the place name essentially means lioness in Ugaritic, and also in some of those other cultures. So the place was named after this lioness god, essentially, which probably means that it was a local lioness cult that operated there. And then the lioness may have been sacred to other higher deities like Asherah, Astarte, and Anat, all of whom were linked to war, archery, chariot warriors, that sort of thing. So there's definitely a strong, as we've been talking about, there's just a really strong lioness deity sort of connection to the ancient Near East, going back all the way to the beginning, through the period of that Second Samuel would have been written. And so no matter what, it's in their blood, it's in the water, they're living and breathing this, and it wouldn't have been weird for them to have, warriors that were lion, had a lion theme, or who were blessed by a lion god, anointed by a lion god. And maybe it wouldn't have been weird for there to be, some giant Nephilim sort of lion type warriors either, given what we know about the Rephaim and some of the other giant clans that Joshua had to eradicate. So.
Thank you so much. I believe that the audience who like taking notes and like connecting the dots, they'll appreciate all these details. So you covered all of this, including the Sphinx tradition. And I just want to add that because this is related to Greek mythology, Chimera was a monstrous, fire-breathing hybrid creature with the body parts of a lion, goat, and a snake. And I'll be sharing this article, very interesting one that we can see. Okay, so this comes by a gentleman called Anbar Kama, Origins of the Giant Lion Man of Moab. And this is a very interesting skull that was found, and let's read the article. This comes from the Book of Wisdom 14:6. This was how it was in ancient times, when a proud race of giants was dying away. The hope of the world escaped on such a boat under your guidance and left the world a new generation to carry on the human race. Nephilim were prideful beasts filled with hubris. Hubris derives from a Greek word hubris, meaning pride, excessive behavior, dangerous overconfidence, and the refusal to stay within due bounds. Oddly, a group of lions forming a social unit is also called a pride. One wonders as to the relationship between the pride of lions and Nephilim. Certainly, lion imagery surrounds royalty just as serpent/dragon imagery does. One ponders over Lion King fairy tales and cryptic lion man and lion god mythologies. Okay, he's going with King Richard the Lionheart. Let's get this. Proverbs 30:30, we already covered this. Urmar Hulo of Sumerian legend were a ruthless lion man race, warriors showing no mercy. Lion men warriors of ancient Babylon and Akkad possessed lion heads, men's bodies, birds' feet, and were identified with Nergal, god of the underworld. Then we have the lion man sculptures found in Germany that unaccountably go back into the mists of time and are also associated with Nergal somehow. King Hambada of the cedar forest in the Epic of Gilgamesh had the face and paws of a lion, bull horns, vulture claws, serpent's tail, and was covered in snake-like scales. The Greek chimera had a body and head of a lion, a goat's head on its back, a serpent tail, and was breathing fire. Mithra of the Zoroastrian cult of Persia and India was often depicted as a lion-headed god with a snake wrapped around him. Unless I'm wrong, I think that the Roman soldiers of the apostles in Jesus' times and even before them, one of their gods was Mithra. And it's interesting how he was also depicted as a lion-headed god. Luldaboth, or demiurge of Gnosticism, is often depicted with a snake's body, a lion's face, and sun rays radiating from him. Yaldabaoth, I'm just trying, I don't know how to pronounce this, is the 13th archon from the house of Leo. Gnostic lion archons guarded gates to the underworld. Apademek was a lion warrior, a lion-headed warrior god worshipped by the Meroitic of Nubia, depicted in the temple of Nakwa as a three-headed lion god with four arms and a snake with a lion's head, but usually depicted as a man with a lion's head. More to be followed is by this article provided at the end. This will be just the basics, how, you know, some of the ancient Near East cultures, mythologies, and people had also these lion-like gods. And I won't say people, I would say hybrids. So this will be one article, and I have one more that I would like to read, and we can be soon kind of finishing with the episode. Okay, this one was written by Stephen Pigeon. His title is There Evidence of Chimera in Scripture? So let me just see if you can guys see. Okay. Before we get too far into this discussion, we should probably get an idea about the word chimera. According to one definition, a chimera in Greek mythology is a fire-breathing female monster with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a serpent's tail. Although Merriam-Webster tells us that it also means a hybrid creature, a hybrid created through fusion of a sperm and an egg from different species. Do we find a record of such thing in the archaeology? Sure, we do. Let's take a look at some Egyptian artwork. Okay, this kind of reminds me of what Dain was showing like 5 minutes ago. Let's read some of the text. We have some interesting hybrids here. A little man with bird for a head, man with crocodile for a head, man with hyena for a head, woman, etc. So the Egyptian record is not shy. How about the Greek record? Well, there's the Minotaur, half man, half bull, the centaur or the centaur, half man, half horse. We have Pan, half man, half goat, and so on. Is there a reference to such beings in scripture? Well, there's this Sefer Yasher, or the Book of Jasher. And we'll read this because it's almost the end of the article. Chapter 36, verses 20-32. And the sons of Shoval were Elian, Manahath, Aval, Shephi, and Onam. With the sons of Tsiv, and the sons of Tsiv on were Aya and Anna, and this was what Anna, who found the Yenim in the wilderness when he fed the donkeys of Tsiv on his father. And we mentioned already this person, Anna, like half an hour ago. And while he was feeding his father's donkeys, he led them to the wilderness at different times to feed them. And there was a day that he brought them to one of the deserts on the seashore, opposite the wilderness of the people. And while he was feeding them, behold, a very heavy storm came from the other side of the sea and rested upon the donkeys that were feeding there, and they all stood still. And afterward, about 120 great and terrible animals came out from the wilderness at the other side of the sea. And they all came to the place where the donkeys were, and they placed themselves there. And those animals, from their middle downward, were in the shape of the children of men. And from their middle upward, they had the likeness of bears, and some like the likeness of the kephas, with tails between them from between their shoulders, reaching down to the earth, like the tails of the, whatever this is, Dachifat? I don't know what is this. And these animals came and mounted and rode upon these donkeys and led them away, and they went away to this day. What does the Babylonian historical record show? Okay, so this is the photo. It's an ancient, in the ancient world, sculpted a kipha on the left. Okay, so we can see uh, the head of a lion and body of a human being, and like I said, this weird word that chefat, whatever it is, on the right. Okay, so this was the person that had almost like bull-like lower part of the body and the upper part of whatever it would resemble. I don't know what is this, but it's a very interesting depiction of that creature. I would say these were like two hybrids, right? And it says, who knows? Maybe the sculptor had read the book of Jasher or Yasher. Then again, maybe it was an additional record and or even an eyewitness account. Is there any other record of such thing in the redacted version of the scripture? Yes, there is. 2 Samuel 23:20. And this is the one of the passages, one of the two main passages that we've been dealing tonight. And it says some sculptor picked up on this and made an image that reminded him of when he was reading 2 Samuel 23:20. We see here a person who is another hybrid of a man and a lion. And then the author keeps going on. What about the Sphinx? Well, maybe it's just a personification. Take a look at the Babylonian record of the men with the heads of birds. So another hybrid or chimera type creatures. Very interesting. I'm not saying this is true. The author of this article is not saying either, but the person is just trying to connect the dots and say, hey, this was not an isolated passage. What we see in the Bible was actually kind of quote unquote normal in ancient Near East stories, mythologies, and religions. Any comment on this before we switch to Dain's section on resources and raw notes? Any comment on these two articles?
Could you pull that article back up again?
Yeah, I turned it off.
Oh, okay. I guess I don't have a comment then. I had something while you're reading it, but then I lost it. Sorry.
Okay.
In the comments, Ben was talking about wanting to find the book of Jasher. So I went online and looked it up, and it looks like it's a known forgery from the 18th century. So I don't know how much use it would be. I don't know if the dude had some real like papyri in front of him and was just kind of filling in the blanks, or if it was just completely out of his imagination and he just Joseph Smith the whole thing. I can say I did look. The Book of Jubilees was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so at least that one that we have that dates back to the 1st century.
Oh yeah, the Book of Jasher is not in the Bible. It came later. Scholars are not taking it seriously, but I just thought it's interesting from the point of like, sometimes you can have, as we know, like also in the Bible, you can have oral tradition that is being passed on for centuries, and then finally someone writes it later. But of course, with how many alterations, how many changes, how many versions, God knows. I just thought it would be interesting to mention it. But of course, I would not tell to anyone in the audience, hey, take this book as seriously as the Bible. Heck, I wouldn't even tell them, hey, take it as seriously as Enoch, because this came way later. So yeah, I just thought it would be interesting to mention.
Yeah. I wasn't. I'm not trying to throw shade on the people who wrote the articles or anything. Just I just looked it up for Ben. So I just wanted the audience to know that we don't necessarily take that as being super reliable, but it is interesting that this is something that is now 400 years old, and this kind of tells you what was in the mind of the people who were kind of around the time when America was founded and all this. This is kind of what they were thinking. So it does give us kind of a look into, maybe not ancient, but a little bit older sources.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be finishing soon. Dain, when it comes to your resources for further studies and draw notes between pages 7 and 11, what would you like to add when it comes to this hybrid wild theory?
Well, these are a lot of this information at the end of the document is was already covered. I just, instead of having it in such a detailed form, I summarized it and put it towards the top of the document. But if I don't know if you're making this available or not, but there are Logos links to and citations to pretty much everything I have here. So it's a good way to do some additional independent research if anyone is so inclined. And so some of my notes, I have some quotes and everything. That's basically what it is. I have a few images in the doc from that Gods and Demons book I showed earlier, and then a bibliography at the end. It's probably incomplete because I think I added some stuff after that. But anyways, it's just a little information for people. I did put the Gary Wayne books in there, which I ended up not using. I tried to use them, but it was not easy. So, but yeah, that's
and I
about it.
wanted to show the photo from your from the book that you were citing, so that people could see some of the imagery. This comes from what is this? Often often guardians of protectors as associated of gods, but also sometimes identify as gods. And you're quoting here Jeremy Black from his book Gods, Demons, and Symbols of Ancient Mesopotamia, an illustrated dictionary. So I think this was very cool that you found for us.
Yeah, that book has a lot of really pretty good pictures, black and white pictures, but pretty good pictures of different reliefs and other stonework and statues and things. It also has some basic illustrations. You can see on the cover, you can kind of see on the cover, it's a basic kind of drawing. But the reason this is nice is because it just allows you to really kind of see the symbolic elements very easily, to understand the names, to associate the names of the different gods and goddesses with the attributes that made them who they were in the eyes of the ancient people. So it's yeah, it's a great resource. I would put it up there as an essential to have in your library with, you know, some of the other things like DDD that we like.
Yeah, I was checking for that book. I was like, maybe I should order, but I'm like, I found you know, links on eBay and stuff, but I think the cheapest was like for $50 and then going up. So it means it must be a good book. Maybe there are not many left.
That's
Copies
probably
to
out
be
of print.
found.
Yeah.
Yeah, so who knows? But I was like, oh, dang it. Like, this is probably a good book to be bought. But yeah, I believe I included like 95% of the sources you put in the bibliography. I included them in this episode description. So people who like researching, you know, taking notes, they can go and buy. I just want to say, and I'll give you guys concluding thoughts. The same way that when we were covering the first most possible theory that these are humans. So I gave a parallel to the 13th warrior, you know, how the opponents of the Vikings look like, how they were dressed and trying to intimidate Vikings, right? So here I'm thinking when it comes to the chimeras or hybrid people, as Shaun, maybe you will know this more. We covered so many RPG games where at the end of so many levels you enter bosses, and as every region, this can be with like snow. This one will be with I don't know, forest more in nature. This one will be more rocky. Whatever the region you would enter in these type of games, giants and gods and spirits of that territory would come out, and they will resemble the territory and the nature around themselves. So you will have in the Bible. I think it's very important. I'll read again just this part. He struck down Benaiah. He struck down Moab's two mightiest warriors. She also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. Now, why are two lion men mentioned? And just after that, not like a regular lion animal. So I'm trying to connect the dots. I'm not saying there is something to be connected, but I'm trying to parallel this with video games. Like, what if there's a territory, in that territory you have an animal, regular animal, and then a deity or a spirit of that region that will be resembling the animal. So what if, you know, just like in many RPG games that we covered and that we didn't cover, what if there was a specially made, or I don't know what word to use, but what if there was like an entity, or in this case, two entities, two beings that would resemble the spirit of that certain area, or the fallen gods with small g of that region, right? and then these entities would personify someone who would be coming from their belief, from their mythology. And we also mentioned this a while ago, that could it be that these were, maybe some entities blessed or anointed by their own gods. So this is similar but a little bit different. I'm just saying, what if this whole territory was about lions? So they had the regular lion, but the regular lion is not actually that given much space. So it's like they kill a lion, no big deal. David did the same. David was killing a lion and a bear, right? So David was also in that way special, but David was not a Gibor. He was not a mighty man like in that sort. There's nothing divine in his bloodline. So I'm thinking, could it be, Shaun, that like in video games, again, once again, when you enter those gods or bosses at the end of levels, they're like representing something of that nature, of that, not nature, but that they're representing something of that scenery, of that region, of that part of the world. And behind that is a lion, but there's nothing special about the lion, but there are these lion-like creatures, they're being embodied in a sort of a like, hey, I look like a human, but I'm more of like this divine creature that is like showing also lion-like abilities. And then I'm like thinking, well, then in that context, it can look something like a hybrid that is not in the Nephilim like a regular giant necessarily, even though it could be taller and powerful. But in this sense, it's something similar, but not completely the same. So I'm just thinking, could it be something like in video games? Would that make sense, Shaun? And then Dain, you can comment.
So as you were talking about that, it just occurred to me that we've actually seen this before. Well, for those who are fans of Stargate SG-1, the serpent guards of Apophis. So Apophis was in ancient Egyptian mythology, he was a serpent deity that tried to swallow the sun. So in Stargate, you have the aliens that are, they look like aliens. But then the guards all wear snake helmets. So they look like half human, half serpents. And so, yeah, this is totally a thing in pop culture where you want to take on the attributes of the thing that you are representing. And so the lions or the lion people who would be representing whatever their goddess was, they would be taking on those attributes, even if they have to put them on, fabricate something and put it on, because in that sense, they're taking on this identity. It would be similar to the way that when Israel wanted to go to battle, they would take the Ark of the Covenant and put it out front, because this is our identity. This is our God. He's going to protect us. So taking on the attributes of their God, they would understand that they were operating within that divine power. So I totally get that. Like I said, as you were talking, it just hit me that I had seen this before. And so, yeah, I did a little Google search and boom. Yep, you're right.
Dain, any thoughts on this section of the potential hybrids?
I like your point, Shaun, about the Ark of the Covenant, that connection there. I think that's a huge parallel here to what's going on with the skin wearing and stuff. I have a little bit different take on the comment about the Egyptian, him going down and killing the lion after he deals with the lion men. One thing I've noticed is like with Samson, there's a passage in Samson. I forget exactly where it's at. It should be in my document, where Samson kills a lion, and then he goes off to marry this woman, and he comes back by the carcass, and it's filled with honey, and he eats the honey, and he gives the honey to his parents, but he doesn't tell them where it came from, and it's kind of like almost a hidden thing. And then he goes and he kills a bunch of Philistines after that. And basically, some of the thoughts or ideas behind that is that this was a ritual of empowerment. It talks about Yahweh rushing upon him after that. So he does the whole killing the lion and then eating the honey. And it's like he's taking on the attributes of the lion, or the lion being both the physical lion and also Yahweh, God lion. And it rushes upon him, and then he goes and he kills all these people. So And there's other examples of that, of doing something like that, going on like a quest or doing some kind of ritual to get empowered to then go to battle. And maybe that's what's going on with Samson. And it just occurred to me as you were talking about how they slay the lion men and then he kills the lion. I'm wondering if it's just because of how they're translating the Hebrew, if actually the killing the lion should be first and then killing the lion men comes second, because killing the lion is a ritual enablement for him to go kill the lion men. I have no idea if that's true. I thought of it as you were talking, and I'm like, well, why would he do it after the fact? Or maybe it doesn't have to happen before or after. Maybe it's just something that has to happen too, if that's what's going on there. But yeah.
Well, gentlemen, brothers, I enjoyed so much. I would just keep inviting everyone to please like, subscribe, and share our videos. Please keep Shaun's mother in prayers. Her name is Lisa, for her health and for divine healing. That's my concluding part. Shaun, what is your conclusion? What was what of these from these three theories for you was the most evident-based one? Would it be like these were just mere people?
All right. Well, first I want to say that what we've been doing here is not disagreeing with the Bible, because we don't disagree with the Bible. We agree with everything the Bible says. This is a process of trying to figure out what is it telling us. So whatever the Bible says, it's right. But it's our job to try to figure out what exactly are we supposed to be affirming. For me, I think the evidence most points towards these were human beings and may have been empowered by some sort of ritual magic, by some sort of demonic false god, through some sort of rituals of taking on the garb of their deity. And so I have every reason to believe that these were people who demonstrated well beyond human competency and capability in combat. So I don't want to say mere human, because I don't want it to get the idea that he just killed two people that were out trick-or-treating, right? These guys were in my mind, if they were humans, these were elite warriors that were empowered by a force beyond human capabilities to be able to do the feats that they were doing. These were heroes, the slaying of which would have been a great endeavor. Unfortunately, I don't think that we can affirm that the Bible talks about Thundercats. It's just it's just not there as far as what I'm seeing. I wish it was. I would love to go cryptid hunting for a lion, like I had said earlier. But in my opinion, yeah, that's where I would leave it, is these were like an epic fighting force of people who were genetically human, but were probably in the process of doing something spiritually to increase their combat prowess.
Yeah, I agree with you, Shaun. I think that's exactly what's going on as well. And it makes sense, just given the pervasiveness of that in history overall, and even in our modern times, where we're having we're having the clandestine agencies of governments teaching people how to enhance their psychic abilities so they can do remote viewing, or or there's talk about super soldiers and things being done with the magic of our time, which would be genetics or enhancement via electronic computer interfacing or different things, but also spiritual. I mean, I think it's probably kind of a maybe a little bit of a conspiracy theory, but I do believe you could probably come up with some pretty good evidence that the clandestine services, or whatever you want to call them, have been trying to contact the spiritual realm for power and different things to enhance military capability and stuff. So it's still happening today, and I think that it makes total sense that is what was going on, that it's not just mere human, but these are highly trained Delta Force type warriors. And I think it was one of the audience commented that this would have been just part of being that divine or that elite warrior, is that this connection, spiritual connection to divinity, as to help you go conquer. And I think that's probably very true as well. So yeah, it's that's kind of where I'm landing too. I wish that there was more in the text to kind of point us back to the whole divine council worldview, giant clan thing, but I don't really feel like there isn't much there in that regard. We have to make some assumptions to kind of get there, I feel like. And it might be, it totally could still be there too, given, it's fluid. Yeah, there are times when it can be just men and they're calling upon a god to get whatever it is they need, and maybe there's some spiritual enhancement there. And then there's times when we might actually have descendants of giant clans and things like that, and it's just very dependent on the passage and the time period and all these sort of things. But that was a really fascinating discussion. Thanks, guys. It was interesting.
Yeah, I also want to thank both of you for your notes, for your contribution, for your patience and explanation to the audience, and all those book recommendations. Thank you so much, Dain, for doing hard labor, way more than me and Shaun. Like I was joking with Shaun yesterday. I was like, look, Dain did a PhD booklet. It's like so much filled with good info, with pictures, with sources. I'm like, man, it really seems like reading a mini scholarly book. So I'm very thankful for your contribution and your help, Dain. This episode will not be the same if you weren't here. So I welcome you back with great joy, great excitement, and gratitude in my heart. And of course, your master studies are way more important than the podcast. But whenever you have time, brother, I hope you'll join us in the future. I'm praying and hoping God blesses both of you, your families, your ministries, your health, your work, everything, and that He'll continue using you and revealing more information to both of you in the future. God bless also all the kind and generous comments and those super chats. I'm pleasantly surprised that this was one of those rare episodes where we didn't have insane people claiming I'm Archangel Michael, or just from Jewish root. I won't call them heretics, but weirdos and stuff like that. That I'll have to silence them or ban them. I don't like doing these things. I don't know why they want to come and argue with us. So I'm thankful the whole night was pleasant. I really enjoyed this couple of hours. May God bless all of you being present. Go out, serve your King, love your neighbor, and we shall see you next Friday and Sunday again. That being said, have a great night.